Let's continue exploring our Pyro solver that is available in SOB, and let's talk about the general approach, how you would normally approach whenever you want to create smoke or fire simulation. And for this one, I'm going to just duplicate my all of these setup. I'm going to select all of them and just drag them in here. And here as you can see, we have some calculation. And whenever you are working with tops, make sure to keep your play bar at the very first frame, and if you were in here some other frame, any changes you made, the Pyro solver, all of the top net will going to be calculated at this frame. So it's a good idea to just always be at the very first frame. Now in here, I'm going to just delete this Pyro solver. I'm going to add my Pyro solver on my own to freshly create the Pyro solver. And here we have our source geometry, and after the source geometry we are creating the Pyro source. Pyro source will scatter the points. You can change the method, and in here we can play around with the particle separation value to create more or less of these particles. And onto these points, this Pyro source node will going to create some attribute, all of these attributes, and we also have the p scale. And we can control the p scale by this particle scale value. Let me make this default. And after that, we need to convert all of these attributes into volume. And you will use the volume rasterize attributes. Let's view this. And in here, we are rasterizing all of our attributes into volume. And we have the voxel size. And if I were to middle mouse button, we have all of these volumes. Now it's just a matter of creating the solver. So let's add a Pyro solver node in here, and let's connect this. Let me view this, and here as you can see we have the fire, and that is because I think we are creating burn field, and here we have the burn field density, and we have this heat information, and now we should see a simple rising simulation. That is well and good. Let me go into the Pyro solver, and in here first you would need to link this voxel size with this volume rasterize attribute voxel size to control your incoming volume resolution. And also you need to link this particle separation as well, because if you want to create a more high-res source, you will need more points. All of these three inputs must be connected with this voxel size. So for that, I'm going to just right click and say copy parameter, and onto the volume rasterize, I'm going to just paste onto this voxel size. So right click and say paste relative reference, and let me click this back, and here you can see we have these two parameters linked. And we also need to link this with this particle separation. This particle separation control the number of particles. So in here, I'm going to say right click and say paste relative reference. And now, whenever we want to create high-res simulation, we just need to go into the Pyro solver and play around with this global voxel size. Let's lower this value down, 0.05 maybe. And here as you can see, we have our high-res source. Our source has been also updated because we are controlling this. Our particle separation has been also changed to 0.05, and onto the volume rasterize, we have the voxel size and its value has been set to 0.05, and this simulation as well. So that would be the general approach for controlling the voxel size, your overall resolution. Now if I were to hit play, and now we should see much cleaner result because we have more voxels information. And in here, if you want to create the fire simulation, we actually do not need the density. Density is used to create the smoke, because we are going to create a fire, and fire should naturally emit the smoke. So which means we do not need the density in our source. So what I can do, I can just go in here and just completely remove this to not create my density volume. Or for this explanation purpose, I'm going to just go into the sourcing, and here we have this. I'm going to just zero out this source, which means that we are not importing density field into this top net, into this simulation network. Now if I were to hit play, And here as you can see, we we are not getting smoke. We do not have smoke, we only have the fire. And if you want to emit smoke from the flame, I can go into the fields tab. In here, these fields are, you know that the volumes inside of DOPS are called fields. So in here we have the density field. Density is a smoke, and we have the dissipation, and it is enabled. But and down here we have the emit from flame. Let's enable the emit from flame option. That will emit the smoke from flame. Let's hit rewind and hit play, and here we should see smoke has been added. And here as you can see, I can see some of the smoke. Maybe let's go into the look tab and play around with the color of our smoke. I'm going to just make this value dark, and maybe let's increase the density scale. And here as you can see, we have our smoke. I can emit more smoke. Let's go into the field tab. In here, I'm going to just increase the smoke amount, emit from flame. That will emit more smoke, and here I can clearly see that smoke has been added. That is the smoke that has been added systematically by the solver. And if you want to create more smoke, if this smoke is not enough, you can also go into the sourcing tab and add your own smoke, inject your own smoke in your fire simulation as well by just increasing the source scale. I'm going to just change this to 1, which means we are going to import our this density volume into our DOPS as well. So let's hit rewind and hit play, and we should see more smoke. And right now I think the result looks the same. I can exaggerate the effect by just increasing the source scale. I'm going to just increase its overall value, and we should see a lot more thicker smoke. And here as you can see, we have more dark, more thicker smoke. But generally, whenever you want to create a fire, you should not import your density field, because fire will generate smoke for you. And let's go back into the fields tab. That is emit from flame option. And in here we have the dissipation. Dissipation is control the dissipation of our smoke. And if I were to disable emit from flame, and here as you can see, we have the dissipation enabled, but our smoke is not enabled, which means our smoke is not in the system, is not in the simulation, which means this parameter will have no effect. If I were to increase the value all the way up to 1, and we shouldn't see any effect in here because we do not have smoke. And to explain the dissipation, let me go into the sourcing tab, and this time I'm going to just increase my smoke value to 1, and I'm going to not import my burn field. And I can do this by zero out this source scale, which means that we are going to create a smoke simulation. We are only importing these two volume, and we are not importing burn, which means the smoke simulation. And here as you can see, our smoke is not rising. We have our source, our this density source, but it's not rising. And that is because onto the fields tab, we are dissipating all of our smoke. And if I were to lower this value down, and we should start to see some smoke. And here as you can see, we have our smoke, and it's going to be dissipated very quickly. And I can lower this value down. I'm going to change this maybe 0.1. And now here as you can see, we have our this smoke back. And this dissipation control the dissipation of your smoke. And you can play around with this setting to control the amount of smoke that you like in your simulation. That's the dissipation. And down here we have the temperature, and onto the temperature, the first parameter is the diffusion. Diffusion will just blur out our temperature field. Let me go back into my sourcing, and in here I'm going to enable my burn, or maybe we actually do not need to enable this because we have our temperature in here. So let's go into the field tab, and I can visualize all of my field in here. And to the top we have field guides. Right now it says no guides. Here I have visualizer. I can visualize any field. Let's visualize our temperature field, and let me adjust my camera angle, And here as you can see, we have our temperature field visualized in here onto this side. And if I were to enable the diffusion, it will just blur out our this hot area. So I'm going to just increase this diffusion to all the way up to higher value. And now here as you can see, we are blurring out temperature. And that is why we have this slow rising simulation. Let's play around with the diffusion value. And so basically it will just blur out your temperature to smooth out your rising of simulation. I'm going to just zero out the diffusion, and we have the cooling rate. Cooling rate will cool down your heart area over time. So if I were to increase the cooling rate, we will get at the very start we will get a higher value of temperature, which means our smoke will rise fast at the start. But as simulation grow, our temperature will going to be cooled down quickly, and we should see that our smoke will going to be get slow over time. So that's the cooling rate. I'm going to just make these values to the default. I can also emit the temperature from flame, which means that flame will add more temperature in our simulation. And down here we have the color. Let's enable the color, and I can manually set the smoke color. That will control the smoke color. Let's hit play. And here as you can see, I am adding a color in my smoke simulation. Let me disable this field guide. Let's change this to no guide. And here as you can see, we have some color added in here. I'm going to just uncheck this option, color option, and down here we have the speed field, and we're not going to talk about this field yet. Let's go into the shape tab. The shape tab will add the noises. All of the forces are built into the shape tab. And we actually, inside of the fields, we actually forgot to talk about this flame. Let me collapse this menu, this flame. And here we have the flame lifespan. And that is the dissipation for the flames. And to explain this, let me go into the sourcing. And this time I'm not going to import this smoke into my system. I'm going to create the flames. So let's go into the burn and enable the flame. Let's go back and hit play, and now we should see flame. And here as you can see, we have these flame length, we have this flame height. And to actually control the dissipation of the flame, let's go into the fields tab. Here we have the flame option, and it says flame lifespan. So here we can manually define how long our flame should live, and these values are in seconds. And if I were to lower down this second value, which means we have this flame will get a shorter lifespan. And let's go back and hit play, and we should see that this flame will going to be dissipated very quickly. And here as you can see, I can even lower this value down, maybe 0.2, and let's hit play again. And here as you can see, we have a very shorter lifespan of our flame. So that is the dissipation for the flame. And I forgot to explain this. Let me go back and uncheck this. Now let's go into the shape tab, and into the shape we have all of these noises. And the first one is the buoyancy force, all of the forces to the shape. Buoyancy force, we know that buoyancy effects make our simulation rise where we have high temperature. And the second force is the wind force, and I can enable the wind, and I can add directional wind in here. I can collapse the menu, and here we have the direction. Right now we are adding wind in the X direction. If I were to hit play, and you see, and I think we need to go into the field and enable this flame lifespan and default out my flame lifespan, and let's hit play again. And now we are getting our flames life back. Let's go into the shape tab, and to add more wind, let's increase the value. And now you should see that these flames going to be blown out by this wind. So it's a very basic wind force. Let me uncheck this wind, and down here we have the disturbance. This force will do, it will break up our mushroom shape. And If I were to zoom in, and maybe let's go into the fields tab, and in here I'm going to just default out my this dissipation, default out to 0.1. And onto the sourcing, let's import our smoke into simulation by changing the source scale to 1, and let's hit play. And here you can see, I can see this mushroom. Here we have this smooth out mushroom. What the disturbance will do, it will add a high frequency noise into our simulation, which means it will just break our this overall mushroom shape. So if I were to enable the disturbance and to really exaggerate the effect, let's increase the value all the way up, and let's hit play. And right now I cannot see the effect. Maybe let's continue increasing this value. And that is because disturbance will affect less when you have a high speed flame or smoke. Wherever we have high speed, this disturbance will affect less, and it will affect more wherever we have these simulations slow. To actually compensate this, I'm going to just increase the disturbance value. And here I can clearly see that this mushroom shape has been broken into this with this high frequency noise. And I can control this noise size if I were to collapse this menu. And here we have the base block. And here if I were to create low frequency of this noise, which means the bigger shape, I can just increase the block size, and let's hit play again, and we should see some bigger breakups. And same way you can lower down this value to create high frequency noise to break your mushroom into smaller scales. So that is the disturbance. It will add a high frequency noise on top of your overall simulation. Let me uncheck this, and down here we have the turbulence force. What that will do, it will change the overall movement of your simulation. And if I were to increase this, and here you will see that our overall movement will going to be changed. This will add noise into our overall movement, and right now I cannot see much of effect. And let's increase its value to exaggerate, and let's hit play. And here you can see our overall movement has been changed, and I can collapse this, and in here we can define the swirl size. And to increase the swirl size, which means we are creating low frequency noise, and we will see some bigger movement changing. And now if I were to hit play, and here as you can see we have this bigger movement into overall movement of our simulation. So that is the turbulence force to control the overall movement of your simulation. And let me uncheck this. And down here we have the shredding force. And what shredding will do, it will add the noise field, add the noise wherever we have high temperature to create the burning effect. You should always enable the shredding whenever you are working with fire. If I were to enable this, and I can just increase its shredding amount, and here you will see that, let me zoom in, and here as you can see we have some of these noise added where we have high temperature to create a burning like effect. I'm going to just continue increasing this value. Let's change this to 50 to exaggerate the effect. And here as you can see, wherever we have high temperature, we are adding noise in here. And now it's starting to look more like fire, because where we have these hard spot, we have this noise. So shredding always help whenever you are working with fire. I'm going to just lower this value down. You need to play around with this shredding value to your own liking. And here as you can see, we have this burning like noise. And if I were to disable the shredding, we will see very smooth movement. And if I were to hit play, and here as you can see, we are not getting any breakup. It's just a very smooth movement, upward movement. That's what shredding does. And down here we have the flame expansion. It will add the expansion, it will expand our overall simulation. And if I were to increase the expansion rate and hit play, and here as you can see, our mushroom shape is going to be expanded over time. And let me increase this value. Let's increase this value. And here as you can see, our simulation is expanding. And right now our expansion is too high and our simulation is breaking. And that is useful for creating the explosion. And if you want to create nuclear explosion, you can animate this. First you will start with very high expansion rate, and then you can lower this value down. Let me go back, and that way you can achieve your nuclear explosion look. That's the flame expansion. And down here we have the viscosity. What this will do, it will blur out all of your velocities. And if I were to enable the viscosity, and let's increase the value, it will just blur out all of your simulation information. And here as you can see, the value is too high, and that is why we are getting this very slow rising of our simulation. Let me play around with this viscosity value and hit play. And here as you can see, we are smoothing out all of our details. We're not getting more noise in our simulation. Let's maybe lower this value down even further. And this viscosity is useful for creating the viscous fire. For example, the candle fire. In the candle we do not have lot more noise. It's just a smoother looking flame. That is the viscosity. I'm going to just uncheck this, and let's go back. And here as you can see, at the pyro source, you remember that we are creating all of these attributes and creating all of these different volumes. And what we can do, we can break up this entire source to add even more breakups. And to explain this, I'm going to just not rasterize all of these attributes. I'm going to just delete all of them. And in here, I'm going to just create one volume. That is our density volume. So what I can do, because we are creating attributes in here, I can add an attribute noise node to noise up this attribute. So let's in here connect this. In here, this attribute, this density is a float attribute. So let's go into this attribute noise. What this node will do, it will add the noise into your attribute. So in here we can define the attribute. I'm going to change this. I think we need to click on it to actually update. So in here I can click on it, and I cannot see because I think we are using this as a vector because all of these input attributes are float. So let's change this to float attribute, and now we should see all of our attribute, and there you go, we have them. Let's click on this density, and now we are adding the noise onto our two attributes CD and density. Let me remove the CD from here. I want to add just noise onto our density, and I can play around with the noise amplitude, element size. And now if I were to view my volume rasterize, and let me increase the amplitude value, and let's play around with the element size, and I'm going to also change the ranges. Let's change this to 0 centered. And here as you can see, we have some broken up source. I can even animate my noise. So let's enable the animation. So now we are getting some breakups in our source. And now I can go into the Pyro solver, and now we should see some improvement. And here as you can see, this simulation is not rising because we need to add temperature in here. So let's add a temperature into this volume rasterize, and now we should see the rising. Let's go into the Pyro solver. I'm going to change the look of my smoke color. Let's change this to value of 1. And in here, by breaking up the smoke, here as you can see, we are getting a lot of details. I'm going to go into the shape tab, and here as you can see, all of the forces has been turned off, and this information, these breakups are only coming from our source. So that is why it is important to just keep breaking down your attributes by adding noises to create natural looking simulation.